Absolutely. I am so excited to be a part of the conversation. I am a school psychologist by trade. So, well, let me start with the beginning. My name is Kirnel Grishby. I am a school psychologist by trade. So education and psychology are two things I'm very passionate about. Naturally, I work with a lot of parents and families in the school system as well as in the community settings. And I just see a lot of the same concerns. We're struggling to figure out how to work with teens. I also have an internship for high school students. I'm talking to a lot of teens. I worked in private practice for some time. I did therapy with teenagers in particular. And so these are conversations that we don't always have the answers for. And I think parents are really trying to find a better way to do things just so that they can preserve those relationships. And I'm really excited to talk about that and hopefully help someone today.
Absolutely. And it's so in line with what American SPCC is about. We've been around for 11 years now. And just to kind of give the rundown for your followers who might not be aware of what we do, we're dedicated to the prevention of child maltreatment and raising awareness of the lifelong effects of childhood adversity. So we give resources and support to parents, child advocates, caregivers, so that they can positively support the children in their lives to give them every opportunity they have to thrive. So really excited to talk about teens today, because I think often, especially in the social media world, we get a lot of tips and advice about the small kids, and right now it's starting kindergarten, things like that.
Right.
And not a lot of conversation about the teens. So I would love to also know, why is it that you have that kind of particular focus area on teens? What is it that you think is so special or connects you to them?
I feel like teenagers are this forgotten population where adults, they're kind of in the middle. So they're outside of that scope of where they're easily influenced by other adults, but they're also not sure of what they're doing either. And I feel that it can be a very scary place to be a teenager nowadays, because there's so much information, but if you don't know what to do with that information, you kind of just feel lost. And working in education and being in the high school and the middle school setting in particular, they don't know what to do. But sometimes their behaviors can make it seem like they don't need the help or they don't want the help. And I feel like that disconnect really brings a lot of teens to do some things that they regret later on in life, or just kind of missed opportunities, really, where having the right kind of conversations, the right type of communication would help them be not only just better individuals, but when they become parents of teens, they have more appropriate tools to pass on. But we have to build those things. And I just feel like a lot of people don't know how to talk to teens. I didn't necessarily think it was something that I was gifted to do necessarily, but I've always been really involved with like my youth ministry when I was growing up in church, and having like nieces and nephews that also are in that age range. They just kind of tend to gravitate towards me for certain questions because I didn't have kids my own age, my own that are of that age yet. My kids are still really small. But because I did therapy with them and I was able to really learn how to communicate with them well, it made it easier for me to kind of share that information with their parents. And so seeing those relationships get better, like the parent-child relationship with teenagers, I think is so helpful, because they're going into, they're closer to being parents than not, honestly. And we can't keep perpetuating, maladaptive practices and expecting things to magically fix themselves. So I love it. And they're fun.
Yeah,
they're fun.
you touched on a lot of things there, and kind of, I'm trying to think of the one that I thought might be a good starting point to kind of dive into, as you mentioned the disconnect between those that are taking care of the teens and the teens, like what's really kind of going on in their mind. Could you kind of talk about that? Is that kind of the root of a lot of the communication struggles you see?
I would say perception is huge when it comes to what we think people need in general and what they're actually requesting. And so when you don't have the words to say, this is what would help me in the situation, or where you don't know how to express your needs, then you're leaving people to guess, right? And I often tell parents, you can't give what you don't have. So if a parent doesn't have coping strategies, they can't teach their child or their loved one coping strategies. And a lot of teenagers, I think, are being asked to do things or behave in ways by adults who cannot model those same behaviors for them. And that's frustrating because they don't know what to do. So one of the things that I find to be helpful is, as a parent or an adult caretaker that's with a teenager, is you want to reflect on that time when you were that age. What did you need? Because a lot of times that hasn't really changed that much. We're human. So a lot of those desires to be understood, to be heard, to have freedom and flexibility, autonomy, just to be taken seriously as a teenager, the kids want those things. They don't always know how to ask. And if they do, the response can vary, but a lot of times it's, you're a child, but we want you to act like you're an adult at the same time. And that can be frustrating for kids.
Oh, I bet. And then, you know, when we're talking about moments when discipline is necessary, I think maybe even just before that, deciding as a parent, when is it a time when you think you do need to correct or go into the
Hmm.
discipline mode? Or sometimes is it that you don't need to even go to that level of communication where you're
Right.
correcting something?
Yeah. So, and when it comes to discipline, I think when there aren't set expectations, it makes it really hard for kids to do what you want them to do. And I think as they get older, a lot of parents, I hear them say, "Oh, they should know better, or they should know this by now." And it's like, well, who taught them, right? Who intentionally taught them the thing that they should know? And that's one area where kids get frustrated because they're being asked to do things not only from their parents, but like their teachers. You know, if they have a job, society in general is putting a lot of demands on them, and they're coming into those expectations earlier and earlier. We're seeing like kids are stressed out, like anxiety is so high and prevalent, depressive symptoms in children younger and younger because they're exposed to so many more things now with social media and with the internet. So we as adults often have to think about, are we even giving them a clear blueprint to what we're expecting of them? So when they fall short, is it really their fault? You know, but at the end of the day, that's not often the conversation, and kids are just being penalized for things that they don't understand, and it can really harbor a lot of resentment and make it more difficult in the future to have more conversations with adults because you start to not trust them when you don't feel like they're giving you the support you need to do the things that they're asking you to do. Hopefully that makes sense.
Oh, totally. I guess if I were to step back and say, you know, if a parent's hearing this and they're like, okay, giving them that blueprint of kind of what's expected, are there kind of common areas or things that parents aren't talking to their teens about, but that are
Mm-hmm.
leading to kind of repeated issues? It's like if we were to just step back proactively and talk about this, it could
Yeah.
save you a lot of grief.
Oh my gosh, just a daily routine. Like kids are just doing whatever they want. And a lot of times it's because I call it like lack of supervision, right? Parents are busy, they're working. And a lot of times if you have two parents in the home, both parents have to work nowadays. Inflation is kicking things into high gear. And at this point, it's almost like we're autopilot raising ourselves, you know, in so many ways. Because parents are still growing and developing and evolving as human beings too. Caretakers are still having to learn things about themselves. And as a teen, you know, they're just watching all this happen. So I think having some sort of schedule and routine in the day and starting that from young ages, I think is helpful because kids don't often value like eating appropriately and when you should eating enough food, or getting enough rest, or like having a plan where they're not procrastinating and they're wasting time doing other things, or mismanaging, I'll say, their time doing things because they're just all over the place. So then when a parent comes or a caregiver comes in and is asking, okay, did you get this done? They don't, it's like, you know, that kind of sends them into this defensive mode because it's like, when was I supposed to do it? Like, because I have no schedule, no routine. And I think that can even help eliminate some of the confusion about the expectations, like I was saying earlier, that children or teens are having put on them that they don't really have the tools to successfully complete.
And, you know, so that was like a really helpful tactical item. Is there anything, you know, previously we have been communicating about there's ways that parents can kind of proactively get to what a child's natural passion is? And is that part of
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, building that strong bond and letting that child know you care so that when there are tough moments, they go easier? Or do you have kind of
Right.
some tips of how to strike conversation and to make sure you're building that bond with your teen so that you can tackle those tough moments better?
Yes, absolutely. So I know we had posted about the THINK acronym, and it's one that I like to use because a lot of times parents don't recognize that parents and caregivers don't always recognize that the way we communicate with kids are ways that we would not want anyone to speak to us. Like if we really if you were to record an interaction with your child and then you kind of play it back and you look at your body language, you look at your tone of voice, you look at just like your natural disposition, and think about how would you receive that person if you were the teenager, you know? So that's like a good starting point. I think, again, going back to from the beginning of raising a child, it's important that we always give kids the opportunity to be participants in conversations rather than just recipients, right? So we're used to talking at kids. And then when they get older, they don't like that as much, you know? And some teens will rebel and get frustrated. And you may see more of the non-compliant behaviors. Just because of the nature of communication is not very healthy. And some children may not say anything, but they'll internalize the fact that they don't like how they're being spoken to or the way that they're having conversation. So I like to encourage people to, or parents in particular, when you're talking to your child about anything, right? Always kind of going with this mindset that you're here to hear what they have to say and have them be an active participant. And what I often get, parents will say like, oh, well, I asked my kid a question and they give me a one-word response. Okay, well, you're probably asking questions that warrant a one-word response. So did you eat today? Yes or no? That's a valuable, that's a valid response, right? If you want to know what your child ate today, you kind of need to ask that question. Sometimes I see parents go into conversations where they want to know more information than what they kind of let the child know up front. And the kid just responds in a natural way. So, or in a short way. So building that communication skill, I think, takes just practice, and not only communicating when you have to, you kind of got to communicate all the time about little things. And figuring out how to make that just a part of the culture of your family so that your child understands that they actually can talk to you. And so I try to think of small things. If you see what your child likes to do, see if you can do it with them. If you have a kid that loves to play Roblox, if you have a child that's into makeup or fashion, entrepreneurship, building, like outdoorsy types of things, sports even, trying to get into having a fun conversation with your kids about that. And just it's hearing how they communicate, using their words, right? Sometimes can be really helpful so that they feel like you're listening to them and they can respond appropriately. So does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, that just like shows, it's all about building that strong bond, right? So that they naturally want to follow up with more information to you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you're a parent and you're just starting these strategies really full on, or you're on this journey of like, I'm going to make a conscious effort to do things differently. But then there's this really tough moment where your teen does something really hurtful, inappropriate, maybe bad words, and I don't know if, it's really intense and it needs to be addressed. What do you do then when it's a moment where, I know I'm not perfect, however, we need to address this issue that just happened?
Oh, goodness. And that's very common because kids do things because they're kids. And so that's where I like to use the THINK acronym, especially when it's an intense moment, because I feel like that's where a lot of unnecessary fuel is added to the fire of a bad situation already. And so for anyone who's not familiar, and we did post this on our post yesterday. So when you go about it using the THINK acronym, a conversation, you have to focus your words and your nature of conversation on saying things that are true, helpful, nurturing, necessary, inspiring, necessary, and kind. So when I say true, I'll see where if a child gets in trouble for something, you only focusing on that actual incident right there will help alleviate unnecessary defense mechanisms, because I'll see sometimes where parents will bring in other situations that occurred because now they're mad, right? And it's like, well, maybe you didn't wash the dishes today. I told you 3 times to wash the dishes. So they'll start with that, but then they'll also be mad about, and then yesterday you didn't do the laundry. And then last week I asked you to do this. And then it just kind of compounds and the child feels maybe that they're being attacked a little bit. When it's extreme cases where the consequence, or the action rather, is just really, maybe getting suspended from school or doing something inappropriate, and your natural response is to just get really upset, I still think that even in those moments, you can go about it using that THINK acronym. We're using truthful, helpful, inspiring, necessary, and kind words, because we all make mistakes. And I do think a lot of times kids don't feel like they get opportunities to make mistakes because the people that are around them have these expectations again. And sometimes they're not always clearly defined. But as a parent or a caretaker, I think it's important that we, even in moments where it's not a great situation, we're trying to make that better, right? And if your goal is to help the situation move forward, you want to be almost like solution-based. Okay, this happened. What are we going to do? And the we is you and I are going to have an agreement on how we're both going to have a part in this. As the child and the person who may have done the offense, I want to hear from you. Like, what would be an appropriate disciplinary action for this? Like, what do you think I should do? Rather than just throwing out the typical, let me take your phone, you're grounded, you can't go anywhere for 2 weeks, no car, whatever the case may be. Sometimes the kids do things for attention. And if you allow them in, they may tell you that I just want to spend more time with you, or I may need some time alone, or, there are things that I am not getting that is frustrating me to where I'm doing these behaviors. But coming at it with a pretty, using that acronym, that framework to just make sure we're focusing on the actual incident, I think is a good way to just at least start that conversation.
And do you suggest that, I imagine tensions are high often in these moments, that you take a moment, that there's a certain, something to be said for just giving it a pause and letting yourself calm down as a parent or a caregiver?
Yeah, I would definitely say it would depend on a case by case. Some things happen and you kind of have to address it right away, right? And so that's why, to my point earlier about constantly having conversations with your children, when they see that you're in a heightened state and it makes sense for the situation, most children are going to respond appropriately. They're going to back down because it's like, okay, mom or dad is mad because I did this, right? And what I see is the issue is a lot of times parents are always mad, like they kind of always talk to kids in an aggressive way, or they're often coming at them with, the communication is just not appropriate. So then when something does happen, everything just seems like the same response, if that makes sense. So it's almost like they can't fully trust your natural frustration because it's like, you're always like this. And I'll hear teens say that mom's always mad or dad's always frustrated or whatever. So, something to say, having children understand that there's more emotions in the world than just happy, sad, and upset, like there's so many more. And using those so that in those moments, I think as a caretaker, if you can properly identify how you feel, that will help you and your child determine whether or not you need a break or not. If you're disappointed, you probably can go ahead and talk about that. If you're angry, you should probably not be together. You know what I'm saying? Like there's different ways to assess it, but being able to express that is important so that your child can respond to you appropriately.
Absolutely. And, when you at the beginning mentioned that, teens really are closer to being parents than they are to being kids in a lot of instances, and their growth, they're about to take on this role. At the same time, I think parents often probably think like look at this young adult. They should know better, like you said.
Right.
But how do we think about that, about leading them into adulthood, and how to address and maybe reframe the way we think or set our expectations for a teen, especially if they seem so mature to us on a day-to-day basis?
That is a great question. And I find that in most cases, parents and caretakers don't often adjust their parenting styles as their children get older. So they may have certain limitations or expectations for a 17-year-old that they had that same expectation when they were, 10. And so it's like, that's not necessarily appropriate because the child themselves is growing and they recognize what they're probably more capable of. And so something that I would often recommend in private practice is for our parents to have weekly check-ins where it's a designated time that you're having conversations about how things are going. So you don't want to do this when you're upset. You don't want to do this when the child's just gotten in trouble or, and you also don't necessarily want to do it when it's like too good of a moment, like you just bought them something they liked and they think you're the best parent ever, so that you can kind of encourage the positive, because you kind of want a standard like baseline. You just want to do a pulse check on how things are going. And I think having that routine check-in is a healthy life skill to teach children, because when they get older, they'll be checking in with themselves and then whoever else that they bring into their life as well. And so when you're having these check-ins, it's a matter of, what are some goals that we're setting? What are some things that we're working towards? Again, we see a lot of teens that are aimlessly raising themselves emotionally, and they don't always express what it is that they're looking forward to doing with their parents or caretakers, because maybe they don't think that they care, because no one's really asked them what they want to do. More so, they're probably telling them what they should be doing. And so giving them that safe space to say, this is kind of how I feel. Maybe this is something that happened this week that I think we could do differently. And a lot of this is intentional conversation that a lot of parents don't have. Like they don't have the vocabulary, they don't have the experience. And so platforms like this are great, because then we can have these conversations and kind of guide them through how to start adding this or implementing this into their home or family culture. But the weekly check-ins I think are really important. And when you're on a job, people are checking in on what you're doing to make sure that you're on track, but we don't do it in our families, and I think that's a unit where we want to be strong. So allowing your child, and also to have a very non-judgmental, open conversation about the things that they're actually feeling and experiencing in the moment. And that's where the age the progression of age, I feel, is more of a difficult time for parents because they don't want to hear that their 15-year-old, is having like boy trouble or relationship issues, that may make them uncomfortable because again, they're still viewing them as a little kid, but they're having these issues. And if they don't speak to you about it as a parent or caretaker, they're talking to their friends. And we do not always want that because their friends know as much as they do. So, that can go left really quickly. But having it to where they can trust you to know that, when I say something, it's going to be heard and then we're going to process it together. It's a growing opportunity for both parties. It's not like you're reporting to your boss. This is us literally like having dialogue and moving forward with the situation together. Sometimes I feel that parents can be uncomfortable having these conversations because they may not have grown up in that type of household. And so if using the words or like having this face-to-face conversation where you have to look somebody in the eye makes them nervous or uncomfortable, on either side, you can start with writing. And that was one of the points that we had also posted. And so I tell parents, you just get a composition notebook. You can get a writing prompt and it could just say, how was your day today? And then you write your response to it and you put it in a safe space where you guys know that's where the exchange happens. And then your child or the parent, whose ever turn it is, they get it and they read the response of the previous person and then they write a reply to that. And so that can be a way, if you feel that having the verbal conversation is uncomfortable, that could be a way to open up that type of dialogue too. And I think it's also a way to document progress in your relationship with your child.
And, I'm sure there are going to be some, hard moments in there, but what a cool thing maybe to keep down the line too, just to kind of show your relationship grow. Little diary. I get that it might seem as if we kind of went off the rails a little bit from discipline to really being proactive and positive. But what I'm sensing is that a lot of these elements are going to make discipline not necessary. It's really minimizing that because like you said, a lot of times it's a miscommunication.
Yeah.
When it is necessary, is it just as important to bring in that thread of I care about you, that sort of messaging that I know you messed up or that this went wrong, but here's why I'm here talking about this and lacing in that message of I care. Is that still just as important in any situation?
Oh, absolutely. And most times I tell parents, your child does not want to disappoint you. Like that is one of the things that most children don't want to do. So when they do that, because they have, we kind of have this mindset when we're young that we can do anything but make a mistake, so then when we make a mistake, it's like devastate. So that added guilt that they put on themselves can make those difficult conversations even more challenging. So that emotional reassurance is helpful, right? You're human just like me. I make mistakes too. This is a situation where we made a poor choice. Okay. Tell me what happened. So open-ended questions in those situations, I think, will get you further than the very dichotomous, direct, and the why. We want to eliminate the why. That's a very defensive word, especially when someone's in trouble. So why did you do that? It's like, maybe they didn't do that. Maybe we don't know the full story yet. Instead, you could try, tell me what happened, in a calm tone of voice. And again, if you are not capable of maintaining a calm tone of voice in the situation, you may want to schedule a time to revisit that and actually schedule it. Like it's 10:25 now. So at 12:40, meet me on the couch. Let's have a conversation. So then you can go in the room, you can yell and scream, you can cry, you can call, you can phone a friend, whatever you need to do so that you can calm down and be a support for your child. Because at the end of the day, they're learning how to deal with life from you. And if you don't know how to do it, then what are we really teaching the kids,
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. And I feel like so much of this could be applied to a younger kiddo, but obviously more important, more nuanced as they get older and older and become little adults. Thank you so much. I know that we talked about a lot and I feel like we could go on for quite a bit, but I did want to kind of keep this to a quick kind of lunchtime conversation. Was there anything that you wanted to make sure that we covered that kind of came up throughout our conversation?
I want to encourage any parent or caretaker that is listening to this live or that's going to watch it later to make sure that you are being mindful of what you needed as a team. Like that is so important because I think sometimes we forget that we went without critical things that still impact us as adults as far as how we communicate with other people, how we navigate relationships and conversations. And so put yourself in that situation before you respond. to your teen. And sometimes you'll realize that, you know what, they just need a hug. They need a hug. Sometimes they need a disciplinary action, you know. It depends. But if we're having the same response to everything every time, that's letting me know as a professional, your toolbox is empty and your child knows that too. You know, your child is aware. So just reflect, and then when you don't know, when you recognize your toolbox is empty, ask for help. Go to the website, look at the resources that you guys provide, and make sure that you're seeking out the support so that you're not able to say that you didn't try. You know, that give it the best shot you can.
Absolutely. And thanks for being the person that helps fill those toolboxes for people
Yes.
locally, online, helping us at American SPCC do the work too. We're so grateful to have you here, to have you as a part of our Trusted Parenting Network. If people want to know what that is, please Google that, check it out on americanspcc.org. Thanks, Dr. Grishby. I'm sure we'll talk again in the near
Yeah,
future.
thank you. Bye.
Right.